What is up, guys? So this is going to be my review for Supergirl Season 3, Episode 11, titled Fort Rozz. So this was an episode that I wasn't as hyped for as usual because it was another all-girl squad episode, similar to the Flash Season 4, Episode 5, titled Girls' Night Out, and that really didn't end well. Usually when it is an all-girls team-up, it can be good, but usually it's not. Usually it's just a bunch of feminist messages, like they say hashtag feminism or girl power all the time. And I feel like here, it was actually pretty good the way they did it. The way they explained why they need a girl team up, because people with the chromosomes that guys have can't go to that star. It made, I don't know if that makes sense or anything, but it's a fine explanation. If they needed to do this all-girl squad team up, they didn't need to. But if they really wanted to, then that was a good explanation. They came up with a good explanation, so I'm happy with that. If they didn't actually have an explanation, and Martian Manhunter, Brainiac 5, and Mon-El just stayed back because they weren't there for no reason, I would have been a little angry. I wouldn't have been angry. I would have been a little disappointed. But they came up with an explanation, and that's fine. It's fine. But what they didn't explain is why they needed Livewire and Psi. Surely Supergirl knows other female superheroes to bring with her, like Miss Martian, or that's really all I could think of from from Earth 38, Saturn Girl and Miss Martian. But she could have maybe went to Earth 1 to ask help from White Canary or Black Canary or Killer Frost or somebody. They didn't really need to bring villains. That was a huge risk, a huge calculated risk that they really didn't need to take. They could have gotten Miss Martian or one of the Earth 1 female superheroes. So that was a little weird, but whatever. I guess they couldn't get those actors maybe, or they wanted to use villains on the team, and they wanted to kill off Livewire and give her a redemption arc. And I guess they have to do that. But they could have explained that better. The explaining that they could only use girls, that was explained well, but explaining that they need to use these villains, not really. Speaking of Livewire, I always hated her character ever since the first time we saw her, and ever since then I've always hated her. She's a terrible villain, and in this episode she's not that much better. She's a little bit better because of her whole redemption and death thing, and maybe because she died, and that's fine by me. I didn't need her to die or anything because she barely ever shows up. She shows up like once a year, but the fact that she died doesn't bother me in any way. And her redemption, I guess, was done kind of okay. Like, it was way too quick. I'm not saying I would have wanted it to be longer because I just don't want to see her more than I already did. But it was so quick. Like, she was like Supergirl's complete villain until 10 minutes to the end of the episode, and then she just sacrificed herself for her, which it's actually pretty cool because Supergirl inspired her to do that, and that's the whole Superman/Supergirl thing, and that's pretty cool. But it didn't really make any sense that she sacrificed herself for Supergirl. It doesn't really add up because they've been enemies for 3 years, and now all of a sudden, because they're working together, because they have a common cause, because they both want to take down Rain, and Livewire wanted to take down Rain because she was killing her friends, not because she's a good person or anything, but because they have a common cause, she sacrifices herself for Supergirl. It doesn't really make any sense. I don't think it was earned. But back to the team, because I didn't actually say what I thought about the team working together. I thought the interactions between Psi and Livewire were actually pretty funny for some of them. Speaking of funny, I'll talk about it later, but there were some really funny moments in this episode. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But I thought the interactions between Psi and Livewire were pretty good. Saturn Girl, it was cool to see more of her, even though we barely saw her in this episode. The fact that we saw her at all, we saw her use her powers, I'm pretty sure, one time. And that, actually, yeah, she was pretty underutilized in this episode. If I'm being honest, really, the characters they focused on are Supergirl and Livewire, and left Psi and Saturn Girl in the background. Even though Psi was the main thing that made Rain flee and basically lose the fight, if you can call that losing. But Saturn Girl was so sidelined that she did nothing. All she did was open that door and try to contact the DEO. That's pretty disappointing, considering she was probably the most powerful character there. Also considering that Supergirl was powerless at the time, which, because she was powerless, it didn't really make sense for her to go along, because she was probably more of a liability, if you think about it, especially when Rain showed up, and she could have she was a liability, because if she wasn't there, Livewire probably wouldn't have died, so it didn't really make sense for her to go there. This episode is called Fort Rozz, so you'd expect Fort Rozz to be the main focal point of the episode. And yeah, they went to Fort Rozz to retrieve that woman who has information on Rain, but Fort Rozz itself was so uninteresting. Like, they went there and they walked around for a couple minutes and they already found her. You could see that it's humongous. In all the episodes it's appeared in, it's huge, and it just looked so small and like claustrophobic in there, and you didn't see, and it would have been cool to see all the rest of the inmates that were put in there, but we saw one. I don't know how that one got out and the rest were just not there at all, but it was just actual Fort Rozz. I'm pretty sure this is the first time we've ever been inside Fort Rozz. It looks so small in comparison to how big it is on the outside, and also the space thing. It was all the way on the other side of the solar system or something like that, and it took them 2 seconds to get there. I get that they had 31st century technology, but it actually made the universe feel so small because they can go to the other side of the solar system in a couple minutes, and also they didn't utilize space. They went into space, like one of the characters went into space one time when Livewire went in there for a millisecond, and I don't think they utilized that very well. And while it would have been pretty expensive to go into space more than they actually did, it would have been cool to at least see the ship like flying in space. I don't know if we saw it or not, but the fact that I don't remember seeing it kind of shows that they didn't. But if they did, then my bad. Like I said earlier, there were some really funny moments in this episode, and those moments came from Winn and Brainiac 5. They had a couple interactions in this episode, and a lot of them were really funny. The main funny one, the funniest one, was when Brainiac 5 mentioned turbulence, and Winn for some reason said the word turbulence, and then Brainiac 5 started explaining it to him, and then Winn said, "I know what turbulence is." That made me laugh out loud. That was actually pretty funny. Just all the interactions between Winn and Brainiac 5, they were actually pretty brilliant, and it's pretty great. I love them. I love their interactions. They're just so funny. Moving on to the Alex and Ruby subplot. So this subplot literally did not need to be in the episode. I thought it was fine. It was actually pretty charming most of the time, but at the same time, it didn't need to be in the episode because we could have had just what's her name? Sam drop off Ruby at Alex and just leave her there for the rest of the episode and not go back there until the end when Sam confesses to Alex that she's losing time, which was in the synopsis, and it was word for word in the synopsis. Synopsis says that Sam confesses to Alex that she's losing time, so like word for word. But you could have cut out all the other Alex Ruby scenes, and it would have been the same thing without the Alex Ruby connection, I guess. But they already connected in episode 9, so we really didn't need the subplot. But like I said, it was a charming, somewhat funny subplot, but it kind of subtracted from the main story, and it didn't need to be there. So I count it as more of a minus than a plus, because you could have just taken it out, and the ending of the subplot could have been the exact same thing. So speaking of Ruby, when Sai did her whole power fear thing on Rain, what she saw was Ruby being taken away by somebody. So I'm guessing that's Sam's greatest fear, which makes sense. So the fact that what Ruby saw was Sam's greatest fear, and also Ruby earlier in the episode said that she could feel the human side of her fighting back, I totally predicted this. I predicted that a whole subplot of the story of the whole Rain thing is that Sam will try to fight back for either control of Rain or just complete taking over of Rain or getting rid of her, because you can see that here. You can see that Rain says that she can feel her human side fighting back, and Rain, the greatest fear that she saw was Ruby being taken away, which is her human side's greatest fear. So it seems like Sam might be fighting back subconsciously because she doesn't know what's going on, but subconsciously she might be fighting back, and something like that. At the end of the episode, we were introduced to our second world killer, our first non-Rain world killer, being Purity. So we know that the DEO captured Purity in episode 13, but until then, in episode 12, it will probably be all about something else. I don't think Purity will show up again until episode 13, because episode 12 has nothing to do with Purity. But Purity herself is not somebody from the comics. Also, the pestilence, I think that was the word that she used, is also not somebody from the comics. So it seems like they're taking so many liberties just changing the names, completely making new world killers, which is kind of disappointing because I would have loved to see Perilous and Daymax and Flower of Heaven, but it seems like Purity and Pestilence are not the same character. So Purity is this woman right here. I'm gonna reserve any opinions until I see her in action, other than the one thing we saw her. But I'm a little disappointed. She doesn't look like her alien counterpart. If she because Purity sounds like it would be Flower of Heaven. So yeah, that would cost some money. I guess it would cost a lot of CGI, which I get. But hopefully, when she turns into her world killer, she looks more like her alien counterpart, unlike Rain, because Rain also could have looked a little bit more like her alien counterpart, but I'm not going to hold it against them because they don't really have the budget for that, which is fine, but it's still a little bit disappointing because it's underwhelming seeing these world killers look like people and not like aliens. In conclusion, what I liked in this episode was the actual all-girl team-up squad. The way that they explained it was pretty good, was done well. The team was done well for the most part, and also the Win Brainiac 5 interactions were golden. Rain herself was pretty badass in this episode, and seeing a new world killer was really cool. Things I didn't like in this episode were, although I didn't hate it or anything, I didn't dislike it either. The Alex Ruby subplot didn't need to be there at all, and also Livewire herself, because even though I liked her a little bit more than usual, I still really dislike her. So I'll give this episode an 8.3 out of 10. But anyway, let me know what you thought about the episode in the comments down below, and also in the poll in the top right corner of the video. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.